All right. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone.
Alaikum assalam.
I hope you can hear me clearly. And we'll start our session today for this week. I see there are still few people missing, but yes, as agreed, I've given 10 minutes time for everyone to settle down, and we will start the session without waiting anymore. Okay, a quick recap from the last week's sessions. If you remember, if we have practiced, we have uh, we have studied virtual networks, and in virtual networks there are many different topics like VNet peering, local peering, global peering, and so on. Right. So I hope you have got a chance to review those slides and the recordings. I'm uploading all the videos on my YouTube channel. So after the recording, the videos are available in next one or 2 days. So let's begin our session. Or before starting, if you have any doubts, any questions from the last session, we can quickly address those and then proceed. If I don't hear from you, that means all is all is well, and we can continue. And today I'm going to share my screen now. You already seeing the screen, right? I'm sharing it. Yes, one confirmation from anyone, either a message or a voice message or a like to confirm that you're able to see it. Yes, that's good. Perfect. So what are we going to cover today? We will be covering virtual machines. So we have seen a brief overview on virtual machines, and we have also seen how to create the virtual machine on Azure. So we'll go deep down on what are the options available for the virtual machines on Azure. So let's proceed with it with the slides. Okay, this is again just a review on the cloud service responsibilities. We have seen that the cloud there are some shared responsibilities on the cloud between Microsoft and the customer, and we have already gone through it all of it. So when you're on prem, the whole responsibility of the IT infrastructure relies with you on prem. Okay, customer is responsible for making sure that the physical data center is functioning well, physical network, physical host, operating system on the servers, network controls, applications, and all of these responsibilities. All of this lies with the customer on-prem in on-prem scenario. Uh, when I say on-prem, that means the organization has their own data center and they are managing and maintaining that data center for their IT services, right? And then we have seen there are different cloud service models available, starting with the infrastructure as a service, wherein you can see that Microsoft is responsible for making sure the data center is operational and available and it's secure, and physical network and the physical host. So your data center is made up of multiple components, right? You need a facility first of all. You need a building or a place where you can uh, you know uh, have your network set up and the host, the physical servers deployed and the storage units installed. So all of those we have taken a virtual tour of Microsoft data center and in our previous sessions where you have seen how the data center looks like, right? It's a physical building wherein you have 24/7 access control, surveillance, security guards, and then inside the data center you have different areas. You have a lobby, you have data center, the server rooms, wherein you have different cabinets installed, and each cabinet will have different components like network devices, server storages, and so on. So Microsoft is mainly responsible for all of that when it comes to infrastructure as a service. From the operating system side up until information and data, it's customer's responsibility. That means when you build a virtual machine on Microsoft uh, infrastructure on Azure platform, from the operating system level up until information data, it's your responsibility. You have to take control of all of these components. And when it comes to platform as a service, you see that the shared responsibility increases between both the parties, Microsoft and the customer. And there are some areas where it is divided even. For example, network controls, applications, identity, and directory infrastructure. Then software as a service, wherein most of the responsibilities belong to Microsoft. And then on top of that software platform, accounts and identities, um, devices, mobile and PCs, information data is customer's responsibility. So that's just quick overview on the responsibilities part when you adopt the cloud computing. So this is not just specific to Microsoft or Azure. It is common across all the cloud service providers. Right, we begin with the virtual machines. Today, this is the topic. This is our topic of discussion. So, planning the virtual machines, starting with the planning, how we deploy the virtual machines. So, these are some important things which you have to consider. So, start with the network. You know that when you create the virtual machine, it needs the underlying network, right? Either you create the network beforehand, before creating your virtual machine, or while you are creating the virtual machine, it automatically creates a virtual network and the subnet for you. We have seen this before. We'll go through it again. Since we have already discussed the networking part, we have seen how we can create the virtual network, right? So, yes, just give me a second here. Right. So we have seen how we can build the virtual network, right? We have created the virtual network. We have created different subnets. So this comes first. If you're planning to deploy or adopt Azure as a cloud computing platform, you have to uh, start with the network deployment. So you have to design the network first. You have to then and what are the design considerations? We have seen that it really comes down to what applications you are deploying and what is the business requirement. So based on that, you'll design your network. You have to start somewhere, even if you can't if you don't have the full details and the full future plan of the organization where it is heading to. But you can estimate some. There can be some estimates you can which you can make with the proper discussions of the with the management. You can decide what virtual machine or what virtual network is required and how many subnets are required, how many virtual machines are required to run your IT applications for your organization, right? Or if you are providing the service to the outside customers. So depending on those factors, you will decide how you build the virtual network. Then when it comes to the virtual machines, you have to also decide on naming the virtual machine. This is again an important point because you don't want to build the virtual machines with whatever name you like it, which you like, right? So the naming should make sense. In the enterprise organizations, there's an exercise wherein all the parties sit together, they agree on the naming convention of the assets. So that by the name itself, they know that what they are dealing with, which component, whether it is network component, virtual machine. Just by the name, you can tell that this is a virtual machine. So there should be a proper naming convention in place. Consider the pricing. Again, it comes down to the pricing on deciding which virtual machine is required to be deployed or which you are deploying on the Azure platform. It's not again up to the IT administrator or the cloud administrator to decide which size of the virtual machine is required to be deployed, right? It comes down to the costing, how much the company can bear, and what is the requirement. Does it really meet the requirement of the company's application which you are going to run? Choose location. How do you choose the location of the virtual machine? Azure is a global platform, right? You can see here there's 70 plus Azure regions available in 140 countries. So it's almost across the whole globe. You have Azure regions, you have availability zones. And while you're creating the virtual machine, you have seen that you have to define the region. So based on what you will choose the region, the location of the virtual machine, uh, based on available services. This is one of the factors because not all Azure services are available across all the data center, all their availability zones or the regions. Place VMs close to users for better performance. This is one of the factor for choosing where to put the virtual machine. So if your company is operating in India, and your user base who will be accessing the service or the application from your infrastructure are within the same country, India, you won't go and deploy the virtual machine in the region of China, right? You would prefer to deploy it closer to the user base for better performance. Ensure the location meets, although Microsoft does not restrict you in choosing the locations, but again, if you deploy a virtual machine in India compared to the United States, the pricing is also a matter that also differs. Ensure the location meets compliance needs. This is another very important point when you are deploying the virtual machine and when choosing the locations for that virtual machine. So nowadays, the compliance is one of the important factor which you have to consider while you're deploying the virtual machines or the applications or creating the storage. Because if you are a finance company, if you have a very strict compliance need that your data should not leave the country, it should not be out of the country, then you have to make sure that you're creating the virtual machine in that specific country and the region, right? Next, virtual machine sizing. There are different sizing of the VMs available on Azure. You have general purpose virtual machines, balance CPU to memory ratio. So there are general purpose virtual machines. For example, if you want to build a virtual machine for your file server or for any infrastructure service uh, and so on, basically. So compute optimize high CPU to memory ratio. So depending on the actually now, how do we decide these virtual machines? It again goes back to the application which you will be installing on the server because the virtual when you're building the virtual machine, either you're creating it for your infrastructure services like DHCP, DNS, file server, and so on, or you are building your virtual machine or the server for a specific application. And in most of the scenarios, in the real time, the application owner, for example, I want to deploy the ERP application from SAP, right? SAP ERP application. Now that application vendor will give you the specification. How many CPUs you need on a virtual machine? How much RAM is required? What is the disk space is required on the disk on the server on the virtual machine which you're building? And what kind of storage you should have. We'll see what are different type of storage available and so on. And now we are also having a type GPU type, and these are specialized virtual machines. and mainly these are now utilized for AI workloads. What do you mean by AI workloads? If you are building an AI, you have ChatGPT, right? Which is very common and famous. Everyone knows about ChatGPT. So that application is running on the server. It also requires a server to run. It is hosted somewhere in the cloud with one of the cloud provider, and it is running on the servers. So those servers have GPUs. Okay, so wherein you have specialized virtual machines targeted for heavy graphic rendering and video editing. So the GPUs are also available for the virtual machine sizing, high performance compute of our fastest and most powerful CPU virtual machines. So these are different types. The sizes basically available. We'll see it when we are doing a lab. You can see different sizes of virtual machines. Now, the next important thing about the virtual machine is the VM storage. Okay, if you see the diagram here, you have Azure Virtual Machine, which is running a Windows operating system. By default, when you build this virtual machine, there will be a disk created automatically for the operating system, and that disk will have the OS also running on it. Because when you're deploying a virtual machine, you're choosing an image of OS which you want for your virtual machine, and it is going to select and run that particular operating system. And it also creates a temporary disk for your virtual machine. We'll see what is the use of temporary disk, why it is required, and then you can also have a data disk. Now, this is something which you can add after creating the virtual machine. Just take an example of your PC. You have your own home PC, you have Windows running, so there'll be a C drive by default, definitely running, created on your operating system on your hard disk which you are using. You might create temporary disk for fast performance. I'll explain you in a bit why and where you require it. And data disk, you might want to keep the data separate. If you have multiple disks physically attached on your PC, you might want to have OS on one disk and data on another disk in order to prevent the disk failure and the data loss. And you can also have the rate mechanism. We are not going down that rabbit hole. It's again a very detailed topic. So for Azure, you just need to understand that when you're creating a virtual machine, there's a OS disk created, there's a temporary disk created, and data disk is optional. So if we can just go through the points here, each Azure VM has two or more disks, OS disk, temporary disk. Not all SKUs have one. So this is a very important point about the temporary disk. This again comes down to the sizing of the virtual machine. So when you are choosing a specific size, there are some sizes of the VMs which does not come with the temporary disk, and this is very important. If you if there is a virtual temporary disk created for the VM like this one, there's a D drive created. It is not recommended to store any critical application related data on this particular disk because this can be content can be lost. That means it is a temporary disk. When you reboot the virtual machine, the temporary disk might be lost. Data disk is optional. That you will see how we can assign a data disk to the virtual machine. Excuse me. OS and data disk reside in Azure storage account, right? Uh, so this virtual disk, these are all virtual disks. These are not a physical disk which you are dealing with. So the virtual disk hard disks are created as a file, and it is stored on the Azure storage. There are again different types of hard disk you can assign to your virtual machine: standard HDD or SSD or premium SSD or ultra SSD. What is the difference? The difference is about the performance of the hard drive. The read-write speed of your data to the hard drive, which is also called as IOPS, input-output processing per second. Basically, it's input and output per second. So it tells you about the speed of the drive, how fast it can write and read and write the data from your hard disk. Azure VMs use managed disk. Uh, uh, what is managed disk? A managed disk does not require a storage account. Now you know that the virtual hard disk is it's just like a file, and it is stored on Azure storage account. So that is all managed by Microsoft itself in the background. So a managed disk does not require a storage account. Azure handles the storage behind the scenes. So when you create the virtual machine, this hard disk, this virtual machine uh, virtual disk is created on Azure storage account, but you are not someone who can manage it. It is managed by Microsoft itself, right? Okay, here we have some explanation about the temporary disk, right? What is a temporary disk on Azure VM? The temporary disk, it is the colon on Windows, which is automatically created when you have the VM build. And when it comes to Linux, you know that the Linux file system is different. In Linux, you don't have C colon or D colon assigned to the drives, the storage drives. It uses /dev/sdb as the location for your temporary disk on the Linux machine. Okay, and it's a local disk. What does it mean? I'll just draw one simple diagram of the server and explain you. Fast SSD storage that comes physically attached to the Azure host where your VM is running, right? I'll explain you this one about its purpose, short-term storage, fast read-write operations, ideal for caching, page file, swap file, or temp data. Improves performance for temporary workloads. An important points to remember about the temp disk, data is not persistent. That means when you reboot the virtual machine, you might lose the data on your temporary disk. Data can be wiped anytime. During VM move, resize, deallocate, or host maintenance. So you can see that this disk is directly attached to the host. It's about the host where it is running, where the VM virtual machine is running, not for production data or anything important. So let me quickly go to the whiteboard and explain you what does it mean. I'm going to share the screen from the whiteboard. Okay, I hope you can see the screen. So let's talk about the host. Now, what is the host and the guest? The host is your physical server, right? Host is nothing but a physical server. When it comes to the virtualization compute, compute. Host is your physical server, and when you create a virtual machine, it is called as guest, right? So your virtual machine is the guest. So when you're creating a virtual machine, for example, let's have one more host here. Now for you, this host layer is not visible, right? This layer is not visible. You don't know what physical hosts are running on Azure platform. So let's say this is a Azure platform. This is the Azure platform, and you're using infrastructure as a service model, cloud service model, and you want to create a virtual machine. So what you will do is you log into the Azure portal, right? You log into the portal And if you have already created the virtual network, you can instead of go and create the virtual machine, or even when you're creating a virtual machine, it will create the virtual network by itself. So you're creating a virtual machine. Now that virtual machine has what all it has. This is your virtual machine. You've just seen it has the OS disk, right? It has a temporary disk, and it can also have data disk. These are the three different type of disk you can have for the virtual machine. Now this first two, they are automatically created, and this is stored in Azure storage. What does it mean? That means physically, uh, come on, in your Azure uh, data center, you have the host and you also have the storage units. Don't go by the diagrams what I'm drawing for host and the storage doesn't really look like what I'm drawing here. I'm just putting it for your understanding. So storage, I'm considering that it has a lot of disks attached to it. It's a physical unit. I'll show some pictures as well for you in order to have a better understanding. So this is the storage, which is highly available, and all your servers basically behind the scene, the host servers are connected to the storage. So when you're creating a virtual machine on through Azure portal, Azure Virtual Machine, when you create it, the OS disk is placed in here. So your OS disk is installed, is placed here. It's nothing but if it is a Windows virtualization platform, it creates something called VHD, virtual hard disk. So it will have a virtual hard disk created on the storage account, which is maintained and managed by Microsoft Azure itself, and it creates a temporary disk. Now, where is this disk stored? This is stored on the host itself. So this host is also what is the host built of? It has components with it. It has a network interface card through which it is connected to the actual network in the Azure data center, right? It will have storage, the interface for connecting to the storage. It will have its own hard drive, local hard drive, right? So it's just consider like your PC. So you have everything which is required to run your PC. Similarly, the same thing will have every host will have. So it will have network storage, remote storage, local storage for running the operating system. For example, it has two hard drives attached to it. For example, three hard disks. Let's take this as example. So it will be highly available, configured as RAID in RAID 5, wherein it will have the high availability. So disk 1, disk 2, disk 3. But for the OS, when you install OS, you might see this as one single disk. Let's say, for example, this is running a Windows operating system on the host, but that's not the reality in the cloud host, which we are talking about here. Just for your explanation and understanding, I'm doing this. So it has the operating system running for the operating system itself, for the host itself, and it has the storage partition created for storing the temporary drives. So the temporary hard drive which you are seeing on the virtual machine is actually attached to a specific host in your data center. So that's why they say this is temporary. If your VM is shut down, when you start the VM, you don't know where that VM is running. So behind the scene, your VM can run on any of the servers which you are not in control of. Okay, that means your VM can be running on this server or it can be running on this server. So the temporary disk, you see, this host will also have the similar configuration, and your temporary disk might be changing from here to here. and there's no replication or the copying of temporary disk from one server to the other server. So that's why it is called temporary, and it is meant temporary. So you're not supposed to install or store any important data on your temporary drive on the virtual machine. Right? I hope that is clear. If you need any clarification, we can do that right away, right here in this place. So I'm just trying to explain you what is happening in the background. There in the data center of Azure data center, you have a physical data center, you have physical host servers, host machines, servers running. You have a storage unit, you have a physical network, everything going in behind the scene. So for you, while creating the virtual machines, it's just that you should understand what each hard disk, the disk which you assign on the virtual machine, is stored, where it is stored, and what is the purpose of it. Right? So, as I told you, you don't know where is this virtual machine running behind the scene. So, what happens is if Microsoft is doing the maintenance on this server on this particular host, for example, they will shut down the server or reboot the server. In that scenario, this VM will be automatically moved and it will be running on this host. It's behind the scene. You don't really know, you don't get to see it. You will not be able to find out on which host it is running. But since you know that the OS disk is stored in the storage, it will be still accessible. The VM will still have access to this storage, and this is the permanent storage. It's not going to be uh, deleted when the VM machine is moved from one host to the other host. Right? I hope that is clear. Let me go back to the slides. So this is always I always prefer this explaining it on the whiteboard to understand what exactly we are discussing and talking about. So that's the temporary disk. Now let's proceed with this. What do you have? All right. Again, there are some more points about the temporary disk. Uh, does the size depend on the VM size? Yes, the temporary disk size also depend on the size of the VM which you are creating. The size of the temporary disk is fixed per VM SKU VM size. You know what is SKU, right? I've explained you, given you the example of products on the e-commerce website, on Amazon or whatever e-commerce site you use. Similarly, all the Azure resources have the SKU size assigned. That means there are different for virtual machine. There are different sizes and different prices available. Similarly, goes with the other products on the Microsoft Azure. So that's what the SKU means. It's about the size and the specification of the virtual machine. So bigger VM, bigger temporary disk, smaller VM, smaller temporary disk. Examples, this is a D series virtual machine. When you create the D series virtual machine V3 version, 16 GB temp disk is created. And when you create the D8 series, it is 64 GB. It's going to have 64 GB. So mainly it is used as a virtual, this is used for paging file. I don't know if you know what is the paging file. It's like a temporary RAM on your hard disk. So temporary RAM, temporary location where the storage, the read write speed will be higher, and the application performance will improve with this. E series, much larger temp disk for memory heavy workloads. This is important to understand. As I explained, you cannot change or increase the temporary disk size manually. It is fixed, it is assigned, and even the operating system disk you can't change. So if you go back one slide, one more slide. So this OS disk and the temporary disk are based on the size of the virtual machine which you create, and it is fixed. The data disk you can create by yourself, and you can you know assign the size whatever you want, and you can see that excuse me, OS disk and the data disk are stored on the Azure storage. Excuse me. They're stored on Azure Blob Storage. Right? We have already touched this. We have seen this. So where to use the Azure temp disk? Page file, swap file. This is already configured. This is automatically configured. You don't have to do anything. As you see that every virtual machine has a temporary disk automatically created, and it is created for a purpose that you should be aware of. Application cache data, caching for caching the data, temporary processing the files, rendering or transcoding temporary outputs, build agents, CI pipelines, scratch space. When you talk about the DevOps, you will know what it is. Do not use it for databases, production files, backups, logs that need to be retained. So you are not supposed to use the temporary disk for. The bottom line is this: you should not be storing any specific data on the temporary disk. It is used by the operating system itself, but it is available for you to store the data. So when you build the VM, you can see that there are two drives assigned to it, C drive and D drive, and you might go ahead and store some data on D drive, which will be lost if the VM is moved from one host to the other host, or if it restarts on the same host. Right now, how do we connect to the virtual machine? There are two ways we can connect to the virtual machine. Basically, there's RDP. RDP is a remote desktop protocol and is used to connect to Windows virtual machines. So if your VM is running Windows operating system, you can use the RDP protocol to connect to it. Or there is an SSH secure shell is used to connect to Linux VMs. So you have to use the shell to connect to the virtual machines which are running the Linux operating system. So these are two default methods which you can use to connect to the virtual machine, because we are creating the virtual machine on the cloud on Azure platform. After creating the virtual machines, it is you are building the virtual machine for a purpose, right? You are building it for running some services. So let's say you are building it for creating your file server. So you have to log into the server, right? Once the VM is created, you need to log into the server, do the configuration required for your service, or even install an application. So since it is a cloud, you have no other means of connecting to it except over the internet using one of these two protocols. So, but these two protocols, it is not a safe practice and the best practice, because the moment you have the virtual machine created and you choose the option to create to access it with the RDP, this RDP access will be available to anyone who has access to the internet, and they can log into your virtual machines if they know the public IP address assigned to it, right? So it is not a best practice. It is not recommended to use any of this protocol that for connecting to your virtual machines on Azure directly. Instead, Microsoft gives you a solution called Azure Bastion. Bastion, it is here. Azure Bastion is nothing but it acts like a secure gateway, a digital fortress that lets you safely access your virtual machine without exposing them to the internet. That means when you create a virtual machine, it is not mandatory for you to assign a public IP to it if you're using Azure Bastion. If you're not using Azure Bastion, yes, you have to assign a public IP to your virtual machine so that it is accessible over the internet. So we'll see how we can use this Azure Bastion. Here, for now, you need to just understand that there is a service. It is service actually. It is a service from Microsoft. So we'll see how we can configure that and how we can utilize it. So Bastion Subnet lets you use RDP or SSH securely through Azure portal. So I'll explain you how we can do that. Then, okay, let me explain you before proceeding. I think that's a quick whiteboard diagram will help you in understanding about the Bastion. Okay, so let's take an example again of our cloud infrastructure. You have your Azure cloud. where you're running your virtual machines. You have created two virtual machines. One is your Windows, another one is the Linux one, Linux VM. These are the VMs. When you're creating the virtual machine,
Excuse me, sir.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
can't see the whiteboard, sir.
I'm sorry. I think it's not just you. No one should be able to say it because I'm not sharing it. But I think you're the only one who's awake. Rest are sleeping, I guess. Okay. Is it visible now? The whiteboard. So on Azure, when you're creating the virtual machine, let's say I've created a Windows virtual machine. Mic is off. Oh, understand. So Ahmed is saying that he can't speak because mic is off. Did I control the mic settings? No. 1 second. Right.
मकसूद भाई आपका मैक म्यूट है कांट हियर यू
Okay. I was trying to unmute Ahmed and muted myself. So Ahmed, yes, you should be able to unmute yourself and say if you want to say something. No problem. I get it. But just make sure that you're able to unmute and check from your side. Okay, right. Now I hope you can hear me properly and you can see the screen as well.
यस यस
Okay, this is why it is important to have an interactive session. At least I should know that what you're seeing and what you're hearing and whether you're able to understand or not. So I'm trying to explain you the virtual machine connectivity options on Azure. So when you create the virtual machine by default, every virtual machine will have a public IP assigned. Okay, this one and this one as well. Okay, now it is again it's your choice whether you want to allow this access to these virtual machines over the internet. But if it is just Azure infrastructure as a service, you have no other means to access this virtual machine uh, except the public IP. So if you are just a user, even if you're an administrator, which is who's connected to Azure over the internet, you have only two options here to access these virtual machines. If it is a Windows virtual machine, you'll use RDP protocol and connect with the public IP address of your virtual machine. If it is a Linux virtual machine, you will use SSH and you will connect to your Linux virtual machine. And how do you authenticate to the virtual machines? If it is a Windows, you will use username and password. And if it is a Linux virtual machine, how do you connect it? What do you use to authenticate yourself? To say that you are the admin and you are the authorized person to access it. Anyone?
एटी
Sorry?
you're asking port number or what
No, no, no. I'm not talking about the port number. I'm talking about the authentication mechanism. If it is
putty
a Windows, sorry, Putty is
put
the tool. It's just a tool.
okay
Like RDP is a tool to access it, to access the server on the cloud. As
okay
Putty is Putty or Putty, what you call is
yeah
just a tool. It's like it is like an SSH client. So you
okay
use SSH protocol. Here you use RDP protocol. In order to log into the virtual machine, if it is a Windows server, you will have to provide username and password, right?
Yeah.
When you're creating the virtual machine, you are creating a username and password. I'm talking about the authentication mechanism here.
Telnet.
I'm asking about authentication. Now,
Mm,
do you use username and password to log into the Linux server? No. When you're creating
no.
the Linux machine, you can't use the username and password. You will have to use public key and the private key.
Public key and the private key.
Okay. So this is the authentication mechanism which you have to use. You have not seen it. I'll show you in the lab, right? So you don't use the username password to log into the Linux server. You use the keys, right? Cryptographic keys. So we'll see that. So now I was actually explaining these are the two ways of accessing your virtual machine. If it is just an infrastructure as a cloud, if you have on-prem scenario, like let's say you have your on-prem network and you have a connectivity between your on-prem and the cloud. And what are the options you have for connecting your on-prem to the cloud? One is with VPN, okay, site-to-site VPN. It's called site-to-site VPN. Another one is Express Route. These are the two options you have, wherein you connect your on-prem network to the cloud network, to the infrastructure in the cloud. So if this is a scenario, if you have this setup, hybrid setup, so in that case, if you're sitting in here, if you are an administrator, you're sitting in your own network in your own office, you can access this virtual machines through this connectivity, right? You can use and reach, you can use the private IP, internal IP to access the Windows server as well as the Linux server because you have a site-to-site connectivity between your data centers. One in the cloud, which is the Microsoft data center, other one on-prem, which is your own data center, right? So it is not a good practice for you to expose your virtual machines to access your virtual machines over the public IP directly. Okay, you should not be doing this. So what if you don't have the on-prem scenario? Now, my company is not very big. I don't have any on-prem setup. I'm just using Azure as a cloud for my infrastructure services. So what can I do? What options do I have? Now, if this is not a safe option, what is the alternative? That should be the question, right? So yes, okay, you're saying that this is not a very secure option to access my servers. So what is the alternative? Now the alternative is what Microsoft gives you is Azure Bastion host subnet, Bastion service. Okay, that's the Bastion service. It's a service from Microsoft. So we'll see how we can configure this. So what will happen is in this scenario, you don't need to assign public IPs to your virtual machines directly, and it will not be exposed and accessible over the internet to anyone. So you will not do that. You will simply configure Azure Bastion, and we'll see how we do that. So you will log into the Azure Bastion. It's again it's done through portal. Okay, through portal you can access it, and Azure Bastion will establish a connection to your server, whichever server you want to connect privately. Okay, so this is a safe option to access and manage your virtual machines on Azure cloud. I hope that is clear now. Okay, so there are two things here. Uh, for you as an administrator, the first thing is that you should know that you can use RDP. RDP is a tool. It's just a utility which you can use to access and manage the servers, right? So you'll use this, and then you would require username password to authenticate yourself. If it is a Linux server, if it is this is Windows server, if it is a Linux server, you have to use SSH client. and that there are many tools, free tools available. One of them which is very famous and common is called Putty, Putty, Putty. And here you don't use username password, you use keys. And what keys are these? These keys are created when you build the Linux server. We'll see that. So when you build your virtual machine, it will prompt you to create the keys and save those keys with you, because that's the only way you can access and log into your virtual machine, Linux virtual machine on the cloud. Right? Okay, I'm back on the presentation. Let's continue this. Right. We have touched this subject also in the beginning about virtual machine availability. Right. Now, your virtual machine availability actually depends on all of this. So unplanned hardware maintenance. How does Microsoft make sure that your virtual machine is available all the time? Because you're running on cloud, you're relying on Microsoft to manage and maintain the underlying infrastructure, the host, operating system, storage, network, and the whole data center. So now Microsoft, how does the Microsoft take care of it? How do they make sure that your virtual machines are accessible all the time? So Azure predicts hardware failure. So if there's any unplanned hardware maintenance in the data center, so Azure is nothing but a data center, right? Which is managed by Microsoft themselves. So so there will be incidents in the data center, some unplanned hardware maintenance. If a server hard disk fails, or a network interface fails, or the storage fails, so these things are common because these are all mechanical components, right? So they fail one or the other day. So Azure predicts hardware failure and moves your VM to healthy hardware. So Azure monitors all those hardwares, the servers and everything, all those data center components. And if they predict that, okay, this server hard disk performance is degrading, it might fail in a day or two. So automatically that the VM, that if the VM is actually running on a physical host, so it will move that virtual machine to a different host automatically. So you don't have to do anything. Action, live migration, no downtime. So this is all happening in the background. Unexpected downtime. This is all. These are the headaches which, if you are having your own data center, you have to worry about and you have to take care of. So that's where, when if your business is small and medium, it is a best option for you to go with the cloud service provider instead of building your own data center and managing and taking care of all of these headaches. So here Microsoft is taking care of that for unplanned maintenance. This is what they do with the virtual machines. They predict and move the virtual machine. Unexpected downtime. Now there are scenarios where you cannot predict everything, right? There might be unexpected downtime. For example, a power outage in one of the cabinets. So VM stops suddenly due to an unexpected failure. So what happens in that case? The VM is running on the specific host in a specific cabinet. Azure automatically heals or migrates the VM. So uh, you know that the hard disk of the virtual machine is stored in the storage. So if there is an issue with the physical server, physical host, if there is unexpected downtime, server suddenly goes down, then Azure has the mechanism to bring that virtual machine on another host automatically. That's called automatic healing and the migration. Again, this is all happening in the background. It's all behind the scene. Just highlighting this stuff so that you should be aware how Microsoft is taking care of all of this. Plant maintenance, regular Azure platform updates, no action needed from you. Uh, there's actually no action needed in any of this scenario from the customer side, because in infrastructure as a service, the underlying hardware maintenance and the uptime responsibility is all with Microsoft Azure. So you don't really have to do anything about those maintenance activities and unexpected downtimes, right? So you have an option here when you're creating the virtual machine. Now again, uh, this goes by the availability requirement. When you're running a single virtual machine, the availability SLA, the SLA what Microsoft provides you will be a little lesser than what you are seeing here if you are having two or more virtual machines. So in case of unexpected downtime, you might have some SLA degradation. That means you might not be able to access your virtual machine for some time until Microsoft takes care and fixes that issue, right? But if you are going with availability set, if you are building your virtual machines in availability set, the virtual machines are distributed across different cabinets, different servers, and different cabinets. So we have seen that in earlier explanations. I'll explain you again about the fault domains and the update domains, right? Now, shall we go ahead with one lab, creating the virtual machine, accessing the virtual machine, doing the Bastion configuration, or we proceed with the slides? What do you prefer? Because it will be easier for you to understand and proceed by
Yeah, yeah,
looking at the lab
we'll
and
go
how
fill
it.
the lab.
So we'll create the this will be quick lab, creating a virtual machine and accessing it. So it will be clear for you before we proceed with this remaining topics. So I just heard from Khaja. If you're all okay, just give me thumbs up.
Yes, yes, lab. We go for lab.
Yeah, only Khaja is saying that.
No, no, lab only.
Okay, lab. Let's go to the labs.
There's no voice from Ahmed bhai.
No voice. When he's given the authority to speak, he's not speaking. Okay, where is our lab? Labs. Let's see. Did anyone do the labs? Virtual machine, virtual networks? I guess no. If you have the labs link handy with you, just put it in the chat, please. Instead of me searching for it again. Anyone who has the link with for the lab? Put the link here. Thank you guys for sharing the link. I'm just about to share the screen now. We'll do the labs.
That GitHub practical link.
What is it? Sorry?
This
GitHub?
this link is okay, sir.
GitHub practical.
One second. What are you saying? I didn't get. GitHub what?
You have shared that GitHub practical link in WhatsApp in group. That link you want.
Yes, exactly. That's the one.
I have sent on your number.
I
Check WhatsApp.
okay, no problem. I got so the same one is shared with from Sujini and Khaja as well. Khaja shared from the Microsoft Learn and Sujini is shared from the GitHub Lab. Okay. So we'll go to one of this. Sharing the wrong screen. Okay, right. So which lab we are looking at here? Managing virtual machine. What do we have in this? Here we are deploying zone resilient Azure virtual machines by using the Azure portal, manage compute and storage scaling, create and configure virtual machine skill set. Okay, this is the next lab for us. All we need is creating the virtual machines here. Let me see some of the labs. Okay, let's not follow the lab. Let's just simply go ahead and create the virtual machines. Okay, by now we should be able to understand how we can create virtual machines. We have done it through lab. Uh, there are two ways we have done it, I guess. One with the Azure portal through the GUI, and the other one is through the command line interface, right? So we'll create a simple virtual machine here. Something happening on. Okay, so here now you should again know what are the mandatory fields you have to select. So I have subscription, then I'll have to create a resource group. So what I'll do is I'll create a resource group here for this practice. I'll say test RG. Virtual machine name. The naming is important, as you know. So I'll create this as Windows. I'll say Win server, just like that. And I'm creating in the ECUS availability options. You can see that you have options here for creating the availability set. Virtual machine scale set and availability set. Okay, so I'm selecting no infrastructure redundancy required. So in this case, the SLA, the timelines will reduce for Microsoft if the virtual machine is if the actual host is down. For Microsoft, as per Microsoft timeline, your virtual machine will be accessible after an hour or two, depending on what SLA Microsoft gives you. Security type, you have options here. Standard trusted launch virtual machine, confidential virtual machine. We are not seeing that right now. We'll see that later. I'm just creating a standard security type. Image. Here you're deciding what OS you want to deploy for your virtual machine, right? So we are going to create a Windows server. So you have various options here. You can even create a Windows 11 virtual machine, as I explained in the previous scenario where you might require it. If you are having a dev environment, you might want to have a Windows client OS also running in order to test your application and so on. So here we are going with the Windows Server 2012 edition. Okay. And then we are going with the 64x64. That's the architecture, CPU architecture, and the size of the virtual machine, right? So this is where it tells you. Let's see all the sizes. We have different series of virtual machines. You can see D series, E series, F series. Now, how do you select the size? It's all again. It will be mainly the requirement of the virtual machine size. will be given by the application vendor. So if you are building this virtual machine for a specific application, like I gave you an example of the SAP ERP application, so that application vendor will tell you that I need so many number of virtual CPUs. So these are the sizing factors. You can see here the virtual CPUs, RAM, and gigabyte data disk, max IOPS. This directly relates to the hard disk speed. If it is a regular hard disk, if it is just HDD, it will be the IOPS will be very less. If it is a SSD, the IOPS will be higher. That means the read-write speed will be higher on the disk, and the performance of the virtual machine will increase. Again, the application owner, for example, I'm deploying a SQL server from Microsoft, right? Microsoft SQL Server tells you specifically that, okay, I need a particular hard disk with this number of IOPS. Okay, so based on that, you will go and choose your virtual machine size, right? So which series are we going to deploy here? Let's see. I go with this one, D2 LSV5. It's a general purpose VM. It will be having two virtual CPUs and 4 GB RAM, which is very less for a server to run. And max IOPS is this. So if you go higher, for example, let's see the difference. See this one. This is also general purpose, but the IOPS is higher. That means the disk read write performance will be higher. And if you go beyond this, you can see the IOPS are increasing and decreasing based on the size. If it is E series, you can see the sizes of the virtual machines are again grouped. Okay, there's a description here. Uh, for security purpose and for a specific application requirement. If you look at this one, sixth generation E family size for your high memory needs. So some application requires more memory. Some application requires more processing power. Based on the application, you will decide which virtual machine to choose. So we'll go with the D series. Let's say this one, 8 CPUs, 32 GB RAM, or 16 GB is also fine. So I'm going ahead with this, and it will show you the cost for the virtual machine. So per month, you will be charged $140. And again, if you're keeping the virtual machine running, if you shut down the virtual machine, you will not be billed. So you can divide this 140 per month by a minute as well. So if you're running the virtual machine just for a day, you will be charged 1 day equivalent amount of this divided by this amount. So that's the advantage of having the virtual machines running on the cloud, right? So that's pay as you go model. So you are just paying for what you're using. Now, the moment you selected the Windows image, it automatically gives you an option to create the administrator account. And you should be definitely knowing that when you deploy any Windows operating system, you create an admin account for it. Whether it is a home PC or a server, you have to create a default administrator account, and you have to set the password, because that's the authentication mechanism which Microsoft uses, Windows operating system uses. So you have to provide a username and password. So, and you have to remember that. So let's say I'll say Azure admin, and I'll set the password. Doesn't remove the requirement. It has a very specific requirement. So you have to remember your password. That's what I've done now. I've created the user. The moment the virtual machine is built, it will have this username and password created, and you have something called inbound port rules. Select which virtual machine network ports are accessible from the public internet. You can specify more limited or granular network access on the networking tab. So this is where you're saying that public inbound ports. When you say none, if I say none, what will happen? My virtual machine will be created, but I can't log in and access it. Right? So there's no point having this virtual machine, right? No, it does have a point. Your virtual machine will not be accessible over the internet. If you have a hybrid setup, as I explained you on the whiteboard from your organization network, you can still access this virtual machine, but not over the internet. So let's say here we are not having the hybrid scenario. We have to use one of this option. So I'm selecting all selected ports and what port you want to enable access for. If it is a Windows server, it will work. You can only access it via RDP, right? Not the SSH. You can't do the SSH to the Windows server. So it gives you the message, a warning message immediately. This will allow all IP addresses to access your virtual machine. This is only recommended for testing. You can see that. Use the advanced controls in the networking tab to create rules to limit inbound traffic to known IP addresses. Now, what you can do is at the max, let's say you don't want to go with the Azure Bastion service. Even the Bastion service will cost you something. If this virtual machine is you're building it for your own testing purpose, development purpose, you can still have the RDP access enabled, but limit the access to the IP addresses. Which IP address you limit to? For example, I'll show you. I'll go to the whiteboard. Okay, right. So I have my uh, the same diagram we can use. I can see that I'm the user who's trying to access my virtual machine over the internet. I don't have the Bastion service, right? I'm exposing my virtual machine. I'm opening the port 3389 on a public IP address, which is assigned to my virtual machine. So let's say my public IP is 5.5.2.3, for example. Just an example. That's my public IP address. So what I can do, I can directly do RDP. I can put that public IP here in the RDP connection, 5.5.2.3, and I can provide the username and password and access it. But as you know, that this is now accessible for anyone and everyone. So it's not just you who can see the screen. They can access the virtual machine. They can do RDP and they'll get the prompt for username and password. And of course, this is one of the preventive mechanism. You can only the people who have username and password to access the server can access. But this can be guessed, right? There are many different type of password attacks wherein the attackers use different ways of breaking into the servers. So they will use any mechanism they can do that. They can log into the server. They can figure out the username password and log in. So if you don't want this risk and you don't want the Bastion service as well. So what you can do is you can restrict this access to the public IP, to your public IP particularly. You can say that only allow connection to my public IP to this server from let's say this is your IP address 10 dot not the private IP. It won't work on the private IP. If you are connected to the internet, let's say you are on the internet connection, right? So you know that every internet connection will have a public IP assigned. So if you're connecting through your home network, for example, this is your LAN, you have this is a typical scenario. It will be a wireless or wired, just for your understanding. This is my home router or Wi-Fi, and my Wi-Fi router has the internet connection. Wireless or wired doesn't matter. I'm just explaining you for understanding. So this is the internet. So my home router or the device will have the public IP address assigned by my ISP, right? So I'll get a public IP assigned by the ISP, but that IP will be dynamic public IP. What does it mean? That means if your connection resets, if your home connection, if there's a power outage, your router restarts or reloads, it will again establish a connection to your ISP. It will get a different IP address. Every time you have a disruption or the disconnection between your router on the home network and the IS between the ISP and your home network, your public IP keeps changing, right? You can quickly do what is my IP address now in the browser and see what public IP you have got. So for example, I do that and I figure out that, okay, I've got this public IP 10.17.1.2.3. So on Azure platform, what you can do is you can set a rule. We have seen how to set the rules in NSG, right? Network security group. So you can set a rule that, okay, I want to allow connection only from 70.1.2.3. Allow the port to 3389. So in this scenario, with the limited features available on Azure, without any additional service, you can control access to your virtual machine. But this is very limited and it is feasible for a testing scenario. If it is just, if this VM, if this server you have built only for testing, yes, you can go ahead and do this way. This way you can control access to your virtual machine in order to reduce the cost of the Azure services. Because Azure Bastion service will cost you. There's a cost for it. Right? I hope that is clear. I'm going back to the screen, to the lab. So you can do that. I'll show you where you can do that. So what we are doing is we are opening the RDP connection now, and we are going to the next screen. And the next screen, for creating the virtual machine, it gives you the option to create the disk, about the disk, okay? And as I explained you, this VM size is automatically assigned the OS disk, and that is this is the size of it. 127 GB is the disk space. So the C drive, which will be visible to you once the VM is created, that will have this much size available. And this is a managed disk. You know what is managed disk? Did I explain you what is managed disk? Anyone? If not, let me quickly do that before we proceed with creating the virtual machine. That's important to understand again. Okay. So where did we discuss about the virtual hard disk? Okay. Yeah. So you know that you have the VM. Every VM will have OS drive created, OS disk. So this disk is called a managed disk. This is called managed disk. Why it is called managed disk? Because it is managed and maintained by Microsoft on the storage account. So you are not doing anything to maintain this OS disk. It will be taken care by Microsoft. Okay, that's why it is called managed disk. And what is the unmanaged disk? The data disk which you create. This disk which you additionally attach to the virtual machine, it will be called as unmanaged. Right? So you got two type of disks here. Managed disk, which is automatically created to the VM and it is managed by Microsoft. Unmanaged disk, which you have to create yourself and manage yourself, which you attach to your virtual machine. After creating the virtual machine, you can do that, but you need a storage account for that. You should have your own storage configured in order to create the unmanaged disk as a custom disk which you assign to your virtual machines. Right? So OS disk size, OS disk type, you can see premium SSD. So this virtual machine size has the premium SSD assigned. Locally redundant storage. That means this will be redundant on the storage side. What are the options you have here? Again, see this, all of these features, what you're going to choose for the virtual machine. A virtual machine is just like a product on your e-commerce site. When you're purchasing a phone, a smartphone, you have different SKUs available, right? Different specifications. A phone with single lens, phone with multiple lens will cost you different. A phone with different sizes will cost you different. So the same concept goes here on the Azure virtual machines. And in you have more controls here in the virtual machine because virtual machine has many components attached to it. You have a disk size, you have a CPU size, you have a RAM size. So this all depends on your application requirement, what disk type it requires, what are the number of CPUs it needs, and the RAM capacity. So now you have an option here while creating the virtual machine, delete with VM. What does it mean? So you know that when you're creating a virtual machine, it is creating the operating system disk and it is a managed disk, and it is stored in the Microsoft storage. And when you delete the virtual machine from the Azure portal, do you want to retain that virtual machine disk or you delete it along with the VM? So you have an option here, like if you compare this with your home PC. Let's say my CPU unit motherboard itself is gone bad. It's not repairable. So, but I have the disk which is running the operating system, which has all the configuration for my application which is running on that machine. So what would I do? I will just replace the motherboard and retain the hard disk, right? Retain the hard disk and use that hard disk on this new motherboard in order to have my OS and the application restored. So you simply use the same hard disk and start your home PC. Similarly, if your virtual machine is very critical, it has a very specific application which is not even installed by you. You can't install it. You have to engage a third party to install and configure it. So if it is installed and configured, so that OS disk becomes a very important component of the virtual machine. So if you don't need the VM, you want to delete the VM, but for later usage, if you want to rebuild that VM, this OS disk, if you retain it, that will be enough for you. So you'll just attach the same the existing OS disk, and you'll start create a virtual machine and use and restore your virtual machine easily. So you can do that as well. Key management. We have not seen what the key management is. We'll see this later. There are many options here. And this is not the SSH keys what I'm talking about. These are used for some different purpose. Enable ultra disk compatibility. I'm not really sure what this feature is, but we can see the details and we can actually read more about this. So I'm not going into the detail again. Data disk for Windows Server. So here you have an option while creating the virtual machine itself. You can create an additional disk like we have seen in the presentation. You can create a data disk. So it is again a good practice. When you are building a virtual machine, you don't just run the virtual machine with the operating system disk. The operating system disk is meant for running the operating system, and that's the main purpose of it. So if you are installing an application, it's always a good practice to have a separate disk created on your server and install the application and save all the application data in the another disk in a particular disk which you created. So you can add and create the additional disk here. We'll go next to the networking tab. Now, here you have an option. As you know, while creating the virtual machine, it is necessary that you should have a virtual network already created, or it will be created with your virtual machine wizard. So it will create automatically the virtual network, but you won't have much control on what it is creating. So you have an option here. If you already have a virtual network, let's say which network I'll use, VNet. So it's going to create a virtual network for me called test RG. Okay, that's fine. Let me create that. And it is also going to create a subnet automatically. But it has chosen the IP range and the subnet range. So it is creating a new virtual network and the one subnet, default subnet in it, and the public IP. So you can see that your server will have a public IP assigned. And it is required if you want to access that virtual machine. If you don't have your on-prem hybrid setup, there is no way you can access that virtual machine if you don't have a public IP assigned to it. And I'm sure you understand why it is needed now. So NIC, network interface card, network security group, actually NSG. So there will be a basic NSG group created. You know what is NSG, right? Network security group. It has rules of communication. What connection is allowed to access, allowed, and what is denied to your virtual machine access. So basic, it's going to be basic for now. We can have a basic network security group. Public inbound ports. What port you want to allow? Again, it's a Windows server. So if you choose, for example, I choose this one. Can I access my virtual machine? I can't access because my Windows server doesn't understand what is SSH. Okay, unless you configure to accept the SSH connection, you can do that. You can enable SSH access from on a Windows server as well. But by default, when the virtual machine, now this is the first virtual machine I'm created, so I have to go with the RDP option only. There's no other option I can choose for accessing the virtual machine, right? So here, what else we have to discuss? Load balancing, we're not discussing it right now. So this is the important thing which I wanted
Excuse
to
me,
show you.
sir. You are
Yes, yes,
saying, yeah, you are saying when we are creating first time virtual machine, we have to go with the RDP, sir.
yes.
In,
If it is
for
a
us,
Windows server, if it
okay.
is a Windows server,
Even
RDP is the
for
only,
it's a virtual machine. If we are using Linux, then only we can go for SSH.
exactly. That's what I have explained on the board.
Okay, sir.
Windows server accepts only the RDP connection by default. So that's the only tool you can use to connect to it once you have the VM created. If it is a Linux server, you have to use SSH as a connection method. All
Okay,
right.
sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, so let's go ahead and create this. We are not going through all the options here. Let's quickly see what we have here. Yeah, these are all different options available for different topics, which we can cover later. But here, tagging again, we have seen that it's a good practice to tag every resource which you create on the Azure. So now I'm going ahead and creating the virtual machine. So it is running a validation. Validation passed. And I'll go ahead and create it. Gives you all the summary of options what you have selected. And I'm creating the virtual machine. So let's let this process run. We'll also create a virtual machine with the Linux operating system. You can just tell
Let me give you first.
this one.
After doing nothing.
One second. Excuse me, guys. I need. Okay. So let's create a Linux virtual machine. I'm using the same subscription again, but I'm using the test RG resource group. And here I'm going to create Linux server. Good. And it's going to be in the same region, ECUS. Availability zone. I don't know any availability zone redundancy right now. And here I'm going to select the image. Let's say Ubuntu server. This is one of the variant of the Linux. Okay, and the size, let it be D4 for now. It's for just testing. So you can see here in authentication type, you have SSH public key. What happens if I choose password? You can also use using password, it seems. So you have an option of creating username password too. It's not just SSH, but the safest mechanism for accessing the virtual machines. It's again you have both options. Let's create one username and password, or we'll use the SSH because we are using the username password already for Windows Server. So let's say I will create SSH public key. Okay, so now it's important to read this. Azure now automatically generates SSH key pair for you and allows you to store it for future use. So it is a fast, simple, and secure way to connect your virtual machines. So instead of typing username and password, it will create the keys. You will see how the keys are nothing but the files. It gives you the files. The certificates are the keys are given in a form of file which you can use. So it will still have a user created, Azure user, or I'll say Azure admin, so user. This will be a username created on your Azure Linux server. And here we have an option, generate new key pair. Use existing key stored in Azure, use existing public key. So this is the first virtual machine we are creating, a Linux virtual machine. So we have to create a new key pair. And these are different types of SSH keys you can create. This all again, we can't go down in detail of what is RSS SSH format and what is this format. This is the encryption. These are the encryption protocols and the encryption. What do you say? The standards which you can use for the public keys. The key pair what you are using here. The key pair name. Now you can give the name for this key, public key. I'll say my Linux key. That's the name I'm giving. And now when you come down here, inbound port rules, again, you have same options. I don't want to go again to the whiteboard for explaining this. You know this now. What are the rules it has to create? Public endpoint port, and we'll be using SSH for accessing this virtual machine. And it goes through the same options. And here it is asking you the licensing type. Now Linux comes with different licensing options. I'm just saying other options for now because I don't have any Linux license. So all the same options. So I'm going to the network now. Now here I don't want to create a separate network. I just want to use the existing VNet, which I have which is already created with the first virtual machine, Windows virtual machine. And the subnet, I don't want to again create a separate subnet for this. Let's use this. Let's look at what we have got created already. For example, Azure portal again. So I want to put both the virtual machines in the same network. So I'm going to the portal. So with the first virtual machine, we have created a network already, virtual network. So you can go and verify that. So what all we created with the first virtual machine? We created the test RG, which is a resource group, which is automatically created. And in this resource group, what all components we have, what resources we have deployed so far. So you can see there's a VNet created, virtual network created. There's a Windows server created, a virtual machine. And there's a public IP address created for your virtual server. And it has also created a network security group automatically. And it has created a network interface card and the hard disk. This is the disk. So these are the things which are created with one single virtual machine, all of this. So now let's go to our network, which network it created. The name of the network is VNet East US, and the subnet, how many subnets is created? It has created one subnet. So I'm going to use the same subnet and same virtual network for creating my Linux virtual machine. SNet ECUS work. Yeah. So that's the virtual network name and that's the subnet name. And this is the public IP. It is again, it will create for my Linux virtual machine. And we are going to have all the same settings for this. Review and creating. Okay, so it says here you have set SSH ports open to internet. This is only recommended for testing. Yes, if you want to change this setting, go back to basic setting. You know that. Now, what is the error here? You got some validation failed. Invalid parameter details. The value of the parameter. What is invalid? Linux server. So it doesn't accept the name. Let's go ahead and change it. The basics tab. What is the problem with this name? I would say Ubuntu server. Let's say UB server. Okay, so running the validation again. Again failed. Something wrong with this VM. Which field is invalid? Image reference, publisher. Okay, code. Target image reference message has invalid parameter. The value of the parameters image reference published is invalid. Okay. Okay, let's do one thing. So if you here there's an option if you have created your own virtual image, the opening system image, because what happens is if it is an enterprise organization, they will create their operating system images based on security best practices and the recommendation from as per the standards, and they will upload this on Azure, and they will use that virtual machine image for creating the virtual machines instead of these which are available on Azure itself. So let's try to use Debian. We'll use some other image and see for what happens to this. Do you have any lab for creating the virtual machine, Linux virtual machine? We'll see which image they are using for it. Create Linux virtual machine on Azure. All right, so here we are going with Ubuntu. Let's follow this process of creating the virtual machine, Linux virtual machine. Okay. All right, so we are going ahead with this. Then the instance details, I'll say, okay, just RG, that's the resource group name, and my VM. Okay, let's use this. Naming should not be an issue, what we used before. There's some other issue it is stopping us. No infrastructure, okay, redundancy, and standard. Security type is standard, and image is going to be Ubuntu Server 18, version 18. We don't have version 18 anymore. Let's go with this one. Generation 2. Administrator account. Username is Azure user. We'll create. Okay. So I think the password what we are selecting is not supported. It will only support the SSH keys. So we'll go with the SSH key source. We did not create the password. We were going with the key only, right? So let's go with the public key, new pair, and my key. I'll give my key. Okay. My VM underscore key. That's fine. And I'll create the username as a admin. It says it is a valid user, for example. That should not be an issue. What this is not making it free. Username must only contain letters. Okay, that's fine. Oh, it should not reserve words. I don't think this is a reserved word. Let's change. Does it change? It's not changing. Okay. Azure admin. That's fine. Let's keep this. And we're going with the SSH keys and the port numbers. We are allowing SSH port 22. Port 20 is allowed. And it's okay. I think this is what is the issue here. We are not getting the free version of the Linux here. It's asking for the Linux license. So is there any VM which we can use Linux free license? SUSE Enterprise Linux. Yeah, this doesn't have a license requirement. I'm using Alma Linux. This is another variant of the Linux virtual machine. So let's try and create this. Oh, before that, I just need to make sure that I'm connecting into the right virtual network. Because if we just go ahead and create it, it might create its own virtual network. Let's check the validation first of all. Yeah, validation is passed. That's fine. I'm going to use the existing virtual network. I don't want to create a new one. Okay, review and create. And that's good. So validation is passed. So it was an issue with the what was that? The license of that operating system. If you are choosing Ubuntu, it requires a license, it seems. And the username, okay, let's verify Azure admin is something what we're creating, and our key pair will be created with this name. So review and create. Okay, let's what does it say? Okay, it is giving you an option here. Generate new key pair. So since we are using SSH as access, and it is creating a key pair for us, an SSH key pair contains both a public key and a private key. All right. Azure does not store the private key. After the SSH key resource is created, you won't be able to download the private key again. So it is important that when you're creating a Linux virtual machine, you download your private key. Okay, download the private key. So I'll explain you what is the public key and private key in a very simple and short explanation I'll give you. So I'm going to download private key and create a source. So this is different than the Windows virtual machine creation. In the Windows virtual machine, we didn't get this prompt. Here we got this prompt because we are creating a virtual machine, Linux virtual machine, and we are using the method access authentication method as public key. So key pair we are going to use. So it is going to create. Now where is the file it downloaded? Okay, we go to downloads. So this is very important. This is nothing but your key, right? This is the key which you need for accessing the virtual machine. So I'm going to put this on the desktop. Let's say here. So this is the key. Does it look like a key? No, right? It's just a file, just like a regular file, but it functions as a key when it comes to SSH keys. So there is a public key and private key concept which I'll explain you. So the VM is being created. Meanwhile, I'll just go to the whiteboard and tell you what is the public key and private. So this is public key and private key is also known as asymmetric encryption mechanism. Let me just let me keep this explanation specific for this lab, because each and every uh, topic what we're discussing here, every feature what we're discussing, it itself is a whole syllabus by itself. So let's keep this simple. This is my server, a virtual machine, a Linux server. Okay. So when I build this Linux server, uh, it is you have an option to. There are two options you have. You have option to create your username and password, or create a user, just a user plus keys. Right now, these are actually two keys which it creates. There's a public key and there's a private key. So it's like a lock and the key in reality. So let's consider this as a lock and this as a key by itself, right? So these two things it creates with the virtual machine. So the public key will be stored on the server, stored on server, and this will be stored outside the server, out of the server. It will also be there if it is a Linux server which you are building on your premises, or you have a server, physical server which you are building. You can see that both the keys are created and they'll be stored locally on the server. But in this case, we are creating a virtual machine, a Linux virtual machine on Azure Cloud. So it gives you an option to download this key, right? We have downloaded this key. And we have seen that it is nothing but a file. And that file is having a specific function. And the file name, I'll show you what is the file name. You can see here on the board, this is the name of the file, my vm underscore key dot pem. You can name anything, my vm underscore key dot pem. The extension of the file differentiates what kind of file it is. So this is a certificate, this is the key. This is the key file. So this is the private key, which you have to make sure that it is secure, placed in a safe location. Because with this key, it's like a lock and the key mechanism. So you're putting a lock here. You're keeping a public key on the server. This is a log. It is stored on the server, and only the person who has the private key can open and access this server. So that's the concept here. So while creating the virtual machine, it is creating both the keys. Public key is stored locally on the server. The private key, you are downloading it on your own machine, but you have to make sure that this file is saved in a safe location and it's not accessible to anyone. And whoever has access to this file, they can access the server, right? So it's like password. So username and password. Okay, so this is clear. Let's go and see, check this, how it works. The public key and the private key, these are the two keys which it creates while you're creating the Linux virtual machine. Right, our Linux virtual machine is also created. Let's go to the resources. Let's look at our virtual machines now. What virtual machines we have. And here you can see we have my VM, which is a Linux virtual machine, and I have Windows Server, WinServer, which is a Windows virtual machine which we created. Now we want to just see virtual machines which are in our resource group. So let's filter that out. Resource group. These virtual machines, right? So now you can see this is the name of the virtual machine, and this is subscription. This is the resource group it belongs to. This is the location where it is deployed, and the status of the virtual machine is running. When you see that the virtual machine is running, that means your counter is on. Your meter is on for the virtual machine costing. So you'll be charged for running this virtual machine based on the price you have seen while creating the VM. And this is the size of the VM, and this is the important information which we need now for accessing this virtual machine. So you can access this virtual machine over the internet with this public IP address, right? So now let's access this virtual machine. Click on this Windows server. And you can again see the information about your virtual machine here. All the relevant information. You can see that the private IP, this is the private IP assigned to this virtual machine. So if you're accessing this virtual machine from within Azure network, let's say from my Linux virtual machine, I have access to the Linux virtual machine. From Linux, you can access this Windows machine with this private IP because they are in the same network now. Or if you have a on-prem scenario, if you have a hybrid setup, you can access this virtual machine from your on-prem data center as well with the private IP address, without going over the internet. So this gives you all the details of the virtual machine now. Now what is important here is the IP address, public IP. This is the primary NIC public IP. And how we can access, we have an option here. You can see connect. When you click connect, there are two options here. You can access this VM with the connect option, and you can access it with connect via Bastion. So Bastion, as I explained you, is a service from Microsoft which you can use for securely accessing your virtual machine without exposing or having the public IP assigned to your virtual machine directly. So now I'm not doing, I don't have the Bastion, I'm directly accessing my virtual machine. Right, native RDP. So this is the server, this is the local IP. What is the local IP? Source IP address. This is my IP. This is the public IP. Let's see what is my IP. What is my IP? Still checking. Right. You can see that this is the IP which is assigned to me by my ISP or for my internet connection. But this is a dynamic public IP and it keeps changing. If I go ahead and restart my home internet router, next time I might get a different public IP address. So that is called as a dynamic public IP address. So now you can see that this has detected my local public IP address automatically from where I'm going to access this virtual machine. This is my public IP, and the port number is 3389, which is the default RDP port. And now you have an option here, connection prerequisites. Check inbound NSG rule. So again, you can control access to your virtual machine, right, with the help of network security rules, network security group rules. So you can have a quick check whether your NSG rule is allowing this access or not. It will tell you whether if there is an issue with the access rule, and you might have to create a access rule if it is not there. Yes, port 3389 is accessible from source. That means from internet. By default, it is enabled. You can access all the virtual machines from anywhere in the internet. Connect using RDP file. So this is the username, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click download RDP file. So the RDP file is downloaded here. Now I can click on this. Let's go. Okay, this is the prompt you get, like a normal Windows server which you're accessing on-prem. So Azure admin is my username and the password, whatever I have set during the login, during my VM creation. And I get a prompt, yes, log into this server, and it is connecting to my server. And that's your server, right? So that is a server, virtual, nothing but a virtual machine which you have created on Azure platform, right? So now, whatever happens within this server, it's your responsibility. You have to install and configure your application. And let's go and see what are the drives we have created are created for this virtual machine. Yes, as I told you, by default you will have a C drive created, which is used for the operating system, and you will have a temporary drive created, which is for temporary files. And never store anything related to your application on a temp drive. Clear? And if you look at your network interface, network settings of the server, you have two network interfaces created, or just one. There's only one. One is not okay. There's no internet on this. And you can see what is the IP address assigned to this virtual machine. You can see this IP address. This is the private IP assigned from my Azure Virtual Network subnet. You know that the IP is assigned automatically, right? You don't have to do anything when you create the virtual machine. And the IP is already assigned. But what is I am using a different IP to connect. Is this the same IP which is assigned here? 172.18.0.1. This is the private IP. 172.173. 169.0. This is the IP range I'm using. This is the public IP I'm using to access my. Let's go back to this. This is the IP it is showing me as a public IP. Okay, we don't really use 0 to connect, but it might be doing assigning a specific host IP for this, right? So just for your understanding, this is now your server, and this is your responsibility to install and configure application or whatever you want on your virtual machine. So this is the way by default, you can access this virtual machine through this way. Now, I would request one of you to access this virtual machine and see if you are able to access it. And there is a call to prayer happening here. I'll just pause for a minute. All right, let's continue with this lab, and then we'll take a break in next 10 minutes. Yes, can anyone tell me if you're able to access this virtual machine? Anyone who's trying? How do you access it? Share the screen, please. If one of you can share the screen and shows that you are able to access this virtual machine. Who wants to take the lead? Not working. Yes, if you can share the screen, we'll see together how it works. Anyone? Okay, Ahmed can't share. Anyone else can share? Okay, so Jini, please share. Go ahead.
So can you give me the access to share?
Yes, I'm doing that now. I made you a presenter. Yes, please go ahead now. Okay, you remember this is RDP access. RDP cannot be accessed over the browser. You have to use remote desktop utility. As I told you, you go to the click on the start menu, start button, type RDP. Yes, that's the first two. This is the utility. That's what you need to understand. See, it's you can't access this Windows server through the browser with the default settings. Now type in the IP address here. Put the IP address which I have given you in the chat. Click connect. What does it say? Okay, just put a backspace. Click OK. There's a space, I think. Yes. So you got prompt now. You put the username or password. Azure admin is the username. And just copy paste the password. Yes, click yes. That's it. You're in, right? So yes, I guess even Ahmed was trying to access through browser. You not have a browser access. Ahmed is connected, so Sudhir, your connection is disconnected. You can have only one connection at one time. So that's enough.
Yes, sir.
That was good. What you have done. This is how now I have a virtual machine created on my Azure network, my subscription. But since this is publicly exposed, I have a public IP assigned directly to that virtual machine. Anyone, literally anyone who has internet access, who has the username password, can access my virtual machine, right? So this is simply accessing a virtual machine over a public IP. Now I want to restrict it. Okay. Okay. So now with limited options, let's say I don't have budgets to go ahead and use the Microsoft security services, advanced services like we have Bastion service. There's a cost for it. What can I do? I can go ahead and create a rule, access rule, right? And limit access to my virtual machine over the internet. So now I'm going to share the screen now, right? So this is my Windows server, and this is my network setting. And here I should have the network security rules, NSG. Okay, there is an NSG assigned to my server. Here you can see that it has created a rule by default automatically. It created a rule wherein it is allowing you access RDP access or port or 3389 from anywhere. Source is anywhere. Now I want to restrict this. Let me create a rule. Create a inbound rule. So this will be an inbound rule for my server from my internet. So source, I'm going to restrict this to the source which is my IP particularly. This is my IP. I don't want anyone else to be able to access it. So if you're not able to access, you can't even log into it, right? I'm just putting this source IP, just source, and I want to say that only allow RDP access. So I can say destination port 3389. Okay, and the connection is allowed, and the priority is 310. Allow RDP from, okay, it doesn't accept these characters from my home. Okay, I'm creating a rule here. Okay, the rule is created. So now the rule priority matters. You can see that this rule is created below this rule, which is having the lesser priority, 300. That means when you're trying to access, your RDP access will still work because the rule which you have created is going below this rule and it will not hit this rule unless you change the priority. So I did this mistake. How do I change priority now? Let me change the priority. So I'll make it 200. Let's say. Yeah. Okay, but okay, we'll go. Go. Okay, so now you can see that the rule is now above this RDP rule, wherein I am restricting access, but I'm also having this rule. I don't want this rule. So if you are accessing, you are trying to access, that will also work because it will not hit the first rule. So I'm just deleting this rule. I'm saying that only I'm allowed to access from my home network to this virtual machine. Now, Sujini, can you try? If you just try and access.
Okay, sir, I will try until.
Yeah. Are you sharing the screen or are you just trying it?
Sir, I will share the screen.
Yes, it will not connect. Your connection will
Yeah.
fail because now I have put a rule, a network security rule on my server saying that only the connection from my machine, because I'm allowing my public IP address, will be allowed to access. So let me try accessing it from my machine. Okay, so I'm going to the RDP file and I'm able to access, right? So this is what you see in practicals in the labs, that your concepts are working. Whatever you're discussing, whatever you're learning in the theory, it's all working practically. That is the proof, right? And I'm able to access my server. So that's it. We will stop here. We'll see how to connect to the Linux virtual machine after the break, and we'll also see how to use the Azure Bastion service. All right, I'll catch you up, guys, in next after half an hour break. Thank you.